All right. Well, Amber and them are going to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And
Okay.
I'm going to get through all this. There is a lot that I'm going to unload. I sometimes put the carriage in front of a horse with this stuff. And so I figured I better take a step back and show you guys like how to like work through the process to work with your golden shadow, which is what in sex magic you work with. It's called the golden shadow. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through that, and then if you guys want me to email you the PowerPoint or the video, just like email me or text me and I'll email it to you because it is so much information. Like even if you're taking notes, it probably will be like too much. So let me get it started and then they can just join us when they log in. Uh-oh, where is it? Where did I put it? No, did I put it in here? Sorry, guys, hang on one second. I just gotta find what I did with this. Oh, it's right here in front of me. Geesh. All right. All right. So, um, sacred sex education, sex is sacred energy exchanges with ourselves and with others. It's one of the most powerful manifestation tools there are in, kind of realizing your goals. So, um, again, this is a lot of information, and I can send this to you guys or take notes if you want. But so the benefits of Tantra and sacred sexuality kind of spill into every area of your life once you start using it. Um, this practice is very common. Hinduism, Taoism, shamanic tantra, sacred sex is even in Christianity, Egyptian tantra, and neo tantra cultures, and they all share very common themes. So it's not like it's a weird thing. It's very common. So sexual energy is known as life force. It's called different things by different cultures, but it's life force. And even in Kundalini practices, that's what they're kind of tapping into. So it literally touches every part of your life. So when you reclaim it and you liberate your relationship to your own sexual energy, your whole life can really change. So the common themes we'll talk about is presence, integration, intention, integration of self, and what I like to refer to as the bedroom arts. So, um, there's a series of exercises I'm going to present to you guys. We're not going to do them, but these are things that you would want to do on your own before you jumped into sex magic. And the very first exercise I would recommend people do is just a very simple journal prompt. And in that journal prompt, I think it's important to ask yourself important questions before you jump into sex magic. Like, how did you learn about sex? Who taught you? How did it prepare you or frame your perspective of sex? Was your sexual education intentionally instilling fear and shame? A lot of us who are older and went through that in the 80s. It was almost a scary, horrifying, like, don't do this, you'll burn in hell type situation. So, ask yourself these important questions and, write about them because this will frame your sexual magic ability. You want to set some of these restrictions free. So the second exercise I do recommend everyone do before starting your sex magic journey is do a sexual history timeline. Okay, very simple. You take a piece of paper, draw a line through the middle of it. On one end, you're going to mark your day of birth. The other end is going to represent who you are right now. And the middle portion, this is the duration of your life. You want to think about significant moments in your sexual history. The first time you learned about the biological differences of genitals, the characteristics of genders. The first time you learned the mechanics of sex. Who you learned it from, when. Your very first experiences, whether it be masturbation, seeing porn, having intercourse. Also, what are your favorite sexual experiences and what are your traumatic sexual experiences? Are there any celibate chapters, intentional or otherwise, in your life where you abstained? So this timeline really is to record significant moments in your intimate or your sexual life. And so you're going to give each of those events a notation on the correct placement on the timeline. And as you're doing this, you kind of want to process things internally as you go. An exercise like this can be very overwhelming. It can be very numbing to see all these events on one piece of paper. There's no right or wrong way to feel about your timeline. This is basically a way for you to self-reflect and accept your sexual history at this point in your life. Some people, depending on what they've experienced, they may need to, seek professional or friendly support from someone they feel safe with, discuss some of the things that come up when they're creating their timeline. It's important also that you kind of step back and you objectively observe your relationships on that timeline. Ask yourself hard questions like, what did you learn or adopt, consciously or unconsciously from the experiences on your timeline? What's missing? What would you like to experience sexually? What would you like to learn or maybe even unlearn about sexuality, especially, your specific sexuality? You could even take it a step further and, bring out another piece of paper, which can represent your sexual future. And, put experiences on there that you would like to have either with yourself or with others, and kind of give yourself like a date range, like a goal. So it's just, again, this is to kind of prepare you for doing sex magic. These types of exercises are meant for you to deal with a lot of the blockages most people have when it comes to using sex work. So sex magic is a form of shadow work. So what is shadow work? It really relates to working with the parts of ourselves that we either disown or we deny. So if you've ever worked with me with root works or poppet works or whatever, I usually refer to these the seven deadlies, lust, vanity, greed, indulgence, all these different things that we all carry these energies, but we certainly don't like to look at them or talk about them or admit them. These are the qualities that we see in ourselves that we think are undesirable. So we don't really fully accept them or consciously work to integrate them. We don't want to integrate those things. But here's the problem. These energies, these beliefs, these patterns, they do linger in our energy and in our subconscious. And when we ignore them, we project them unknowingly in our lives. We project them onto other people, we project them onto situations. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to have a negative ripple effect that affects us. So it does affect our ability to maintain healthy relationships. It affects our ability to take action at times when there's opportunity. It really affects the way that we're able to deal with obstacles and expanding our soul. So it is important that we all do shadow work. So I put the magic ingredient in bringing light to the shadows of our subconscious is simply the intention to bring awareness to our subconscious mind. If you tell yourself that you want to deal with these things and you want to figure out your triggers and try to resolve them, that's half the battle right there. That's self-awareness. And so self-awareness does invite us to, kind of look at our deeply embedded trauma and how we've been conditioned and how that conditioning has shaped our decision-making process and how we react to things in life. And so how does that interact with, sex magic or your sex life? Well, it's really impossible for any of us at our ages here to grow up without any kind of sexual trauma. I don't know very many people that don't have sexual trauma of one shape, form, or another. It's almost impossible to escape kind of the fear-based, hyper-eroticized narratives that are also put out by the media, by religion, pornography, schools, our friends, it's kind of endless. So these are often really deeply rooted in our subconscious, and we aren't even always aware that we allow these limiting perspectives to rule our lives. So with awareness, we're empowering ourselves. We're going to use these limiting beliefs, these triggers, these traumas as gateways into ourselves. And I put this sentence on here because vulnerability energetically really tells the world that you're willing to risk what feels safe in the name of change. And that's what shadow work is. You're kind of taking that risk to deal with some uncomfortable things that may have uncomfortable consequences we have to work through because you want to change. And that's very powerful. You know, that's that very powerful in terms of soul expansion. Um, so a lot of us do feel let down with our sex lives. You know, like I don't know very many people who's like, you know, I have such a wonderful sex life, maybe temporarily, but it usually doesn't last. Most people feel like there's something more, and there really is, and it is in your shadows. So sexual shadow work kind of illuminates also our deepest desires, you know, purposeful relating, pleasure. You know, these are okay things. These are things that, you know, these are gifts that we've been given. So doing sex magic, it really does address these things. It eliminates this shame and guilt and fear around sexuality, around our bodies that are usually imposed by society and institutions. It shines a light on our shadow to empower us to reclaim our own eroticism. Again, a very powerful tool in manifesting, attracting things to you, opening doors. So when we don't own our desires, when we don't own up to our triggers, we are going to project them onto other people. And it's also going to create blockage in other areas. You know, if we're trying to open a business and get a business off the ground and we're projecting shadow energy everywhere, we're going to really struggle. So it's important. It's not just sex magic, it will affect other areas. So, 4 ways to integrate your sexual shadow with awareness. It's intention, you know, very easy. Observe your emotional reactions without judgment. It sounds easy, but that's hard, right? Because we're always judging ourselves, even though we don't realize it. When we have these emotional reactions, how often do we take a step back and really look at them and say, why am I reacting that way? And not placing judgment on ourselves like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done this, or what's wrong with me? You know, take that out of the equation. Be conscious of that internal dialogue. What are you saying to yourself? So, I mean, how often are we in situations where, you know, we're thinking these horrible things and we're going through motions presentation wise, and we're not, the two don't connect. They're two different energies. So be conscious of that. What are you telling yourself? And what are you then projecting? Acknowledge your good qualities while also seeing the opposite in yourself as well. Everything's about balance and moderation, right? So we all have good and bad qualities. That's just the way it is. So look at your good. Don't just focus on bad, you know, like look at both and say, okay, well, this is good, this is bad. I better work on this. You know, amplify that. Look at both. And embrace your sex positivity. There's nothing wrong with sex. There's nothing wrong with erotic, you know, eroticism, that erotic energy. It's just something that society has kind of made us feel is wrong. All right, so triggers, I want to talk a little bit about that. They are there to keep us safe. These are trauma responses. They're very instinctual. You know, we develop these and reinforce these usually throughout our childhood. You know, I put in here being triggered is kind of like doing a Freaky Friday switcheroo with a much younger version of ourselves, right? You know, I'm in my mid to late 40s, and when I'm triggered, it can take me back to when I was 10, 11, 12 years old for that moment. How often do we recognize that? Not often, because usually we're in an escalated state, but that's what triggers do. So when we are triggered, we are immediately shifted into this consciousness in which we originally experienced that similar traumatic event. So if I'm having a argument with my ex-husband and he's saying horrible, awful things, and I'm getting worked up and I'm feeling maybe nervous, I might go back to a time when I was 12 years old and my father was scaring me and yelling at me and saying awful things to me or something like that. So that's very normal, but the important thing is recognizing that. As human beings, we're going to fall into usually two categories when we're triggered: fight versus flight, right? Or freeze versus fawn. You can't outthink what your body feels. You have to feel it in order to heal it, right? So I have this neat little chart here. It shows a lizard brain, a mammal brain, and a human brain. And, you know, how it kind of breaks down like that autopilot mode is definitely fight or flight. That's our lizard brain, right? That's brain stem, cerebellum. That is our fight or flight 100%. That's our autopilot. Our mammalian brain, your limbic system, right? This is your emotions, your memories, your habits. This is where we make decisions. Okay. This is where we're getting into more of that freeze or fawn, right? So Then there's that human brain, that neocortex, right? This is language, abstract thought, imagination, our consciousness. This is where we reason, where we rationalize, where we justify sometimes. So it kind of breaks down into these three. I mean, they're kind of like the primary response mechanisms when we're triggered. Are we going to go autopilot? Are we going to make a decision? Or are we going to start reasoning and rationalizing? And what part of our brain is doing that for us? So again, awareness, the more you know, the more you can control it. So the next exercise I recommend as you're starting sex magic is the rage ritual, right? So we just talked about triggers and we talked about a lot of conditioning. So when we're going into, and really this applies to any type of magic, not just sex magic. However, it is important to release the blockage so that we can manifest. So for this ritual, really, it's a release ritual. It's to feel things like anger, frustration, sadness, fear, guilt. I'm kind of specifying this for sexual and relationship type energies because we are talking about sex magic tonight. But it's about giving yourself space to have that full permission to just kind of uncork the bottle of your consciousness and let everything rip, right? Because again, you have to feel it to heal it. You can't heal something if you're not if you're not pulling it up. So it is going to feel awkward. It could feel, kind of scary to lean in sometimes, but it is liberating. Once you're starting to let go of the baggage that you've been carrying in life, it is very liberating. So what I suggest here is start by journaling 5 to 10 things that you find frustrating. Explore the range, everything from simple pet peeves all the way to like, the big things like human beings in general. And also consider your sexual history timeline as a guide here. The angry, frustrating, sad, scary points on that timeline. What are the 5 to 10 big ones? Put on some loud, intense music. I mean, obviously, if you're putting meditation music on, it's going to be hard to, let everything out. I'd put on some Metallica or something. You can put on tribal sounds. I like it, but the more angsty, the more loud, the more like the more you're going to get into it. Music really does help, with your energy. It lifts it up and it vibrates it. So if you want to rage, put on some rage music. Um, 9 Inch Nails, that's a good one. Love Nin. All right, so give yourself enough space to have a tantrum so that you can scream, stomp your feet, hit a pillow. Commit to doing this for at least 10 minutes. I mean, obviously be careful of your surroundings, and it is going to be awkward at first. You're probably going to have to do this a few times, but just let the emotions express themselves and leave your body. That's the important part of this ritual is you have to push them out. When you feel complete, which is usually exhaustion or fatigue, scan through your awareness at that point and ask yourself, is there anything else in there that I can get out right now? Ideally, you want to keep going until you feel like that dissipate, that charge of emotions dissipate, and you start coming up blank. Maybe you're not going to do that in one session. Obviously, some of us have a lot of garbage in there to get, so it may take a while. You want to honor your body, honor yourself and the courage it takes to do something like this. It's not easy, like it is awkward and it's hard sometimes to look at these things, to push them out. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. So honor yourself in that process. Don't push yourself too hard. If it becomes too overwhelming and you feel like you just need to break, then break. Don't force yourself through something. And then when you end this ritual, lie down on your back, do some meditation or some gentle music at that point, maybe some light yoga, butterfly pose, fish pose, just kind of, relax and let yourself get moderated. So a very important step in release prior to sex magic. So the next exercise is the mirror masturbation ritual. And so take it or leave it. I'm going to tell you what works best in getting yourself ready for these things. So masturbation, it does foster self-confidence, body acceptance, and empowers you to take ownership of your own pleasure. It also, this specific exercise allows you to kind of soul gaze with your flawed human self so you can see your inner divinity at the same time. And so oftentimes when it comes to sex, what do we all get worked up about? How do I look? What is my body doing? What noises are being made? Especially as we get older and things aren't the way they used to be. Like Like we're constantly just in this state of worry about how we look and the noises and the sounds. Let all that go. Who gives a shit? We're all flawed human beings, right? Who gives a shit? Um, Having sex is such a sacred act and it's such a huge exchange of energy that it is divine and you need to recognize that. So these types of exercises are geared to get you to accept that. It's hard to accept that at first. So with this exercise, standing in front of a mirror fully clothed, just look at yourself, look at yourself for a prolonged, uncomfortable period of time. Maybe this is as far as you go the first time, and that's okay. Try taking off one piece of clothing at a time until you are naked in front of the mirror, and then, really pause and look at yourself. Say kind things to yourself, say kind things about your body. Um, who are you as a person? Acknowledge all the wonderfulness that you see in the mirror in front of you. What are you good at? What do you like about yourself? And then at that point, you can begin to incorporate self-touching or massage. I always say start with a non-erotic touch. You don't have to like rush to your genitals or anything, but like it is about loving ourselves and showing ourselves love. So if you are feeling aligned and alive while you're doing this exercise, do incorporate full masturbation. Make love to yourself and you can witness your body change with pleasure. Um, and our body does, it changes in so many ways when we're in that pleasure mode. So that is the mirror masturbation ritual, which I suggest trying at least once. I know like, some people are like, that's weird, but try it. All right, the next exercise is very important. It's the forgiveness ritual. I know I'm throwing a lot of rituals at you guys tonight, but believe me, these things are important before you do sex magic or really any form of magic. So with the forgiveness ritual, this is about letting go of judgment, resentment, and shame. And so this process is pretty streamlined to help you do that. So the first thing, you're going to write a letter of forgiveness. You're probably going to feel called to forgive more than one person, maybe even yourself, your parents, teachers, peers, past sexual partners, people that have hurt you. I want you, to address lingering resentments that affect you. Be honest with yourself about who you feel ready to forgive and consider if you believe certain individuals do not deserve forgiveness, because I'm not about forgiving people who don't deserve forgiveness, but we'll get into that later. So I don't recommend you push yourself to write a forgiveness letter unless you can really do so with compassion and authenticity. Don't force yourself, right? You need to be ready. You may not be ready to forgive everyone who's wronged you or who's crossed your boundaries or, lied to you. And that's okay. For pull the people that you are able and willing to forgive. So the second part of this, you may need to do several rage rituals that we just talked about before you are ready to do this and to release that charge fully. And that charge has to be released before a forgiveness letter really makes sense. And so, a forgiveness letter may look something like, I forgive myself for not saying no, or I forgive myself for listening and taking, X, Y, and Z's advice. Or I forgive my ex for forcing me to have sex before I was ready. Or, it could be anything, it doesn't have to be a certain way. It can be brief, it can be involved, it can be whatever it needs to be to give you that release, that charge. And then lastly, I put consider lighting a candle and burning this letter. You can burn it over a fire safe tray or pan. If you're not comfortable with fire, tear it up into small pieces just to symbolize the alchemy of release, because that's power and that's magic too. These symbolic acts are releasing energy into the universe, saying, this is something that I'm doing, it's important, and the universe is going to kick energy back. So make it important, do some sort of ritualized closure for that release. The next exercise I call the higher self meditation. So this is meant to help you connect to and clarify your intentions for more expansive and liberating intimacy. So this is all, put on some quiet music. I like using my Alexa. I'll say, Alexa, play sleep music. Wonderful collection there of music that's perfect for this exercise. If you don't want to do that and you have some privacy, go outside. You have the organic sound of nature. You could even use a guided meditation. Like there's a lot of them on YouTube to connect you to your higher self. But you're going to want to relax your body, do a drop in. Call forth the energy of your higher self. You know, your higher self could be perceived as a more healed or evolved version of you now. It's you on a higher timeline, right? So consider, how do they, your higher self, how do they perceive their sexuality? How do they express it? What relating structure or preference do they embody? Is this in alignment with how you are right now today, or how you currently approach intimacy? And if not, what's the gap? That's probably the most important part of this exercise. And what can you do today to begin closing that gap, right? Look at your higher self, look at you now. Where's the misalignment? What do you need to do to get there? And then you want to allow messages to come through. You know, I've had dreams where my higher self has come and given me information. That is something very attainable. Allow these messages to come in, whether it's through dreams or through it could be any kind of sign or synchronicity. Don't have any expectations, don't have any judgment. Let your mind flow where it needs to, but pay special attention to feelings, visualizations, sensations, thoughts, words, symbols, anything that flows into your consciousness while you're doing this exercise, because it probably is divine messaging. And then end the meditation by setting your intention to use this clarity that you're going to get out of this meditation to help you choose a relating style that supports your current season of expansion. You know, this is where you're at, where you're going. It's your season of expansion. So, use this information that you get from this to help support that. So I want to talk a little bit about types of sex. So there's 4 types of sex. Take a sip here. Hang on. Is everybody okay? I know I'm going fast. Everybody's good? Okay. First form of sex, reproductive sex. It's exactly what it sounds like. This is basically sex to make a baby. Then there's recreational sex, right? This is for the intent of bodily pleasure or passing the time. It's for fun. It's for the orgasms. That's it, right? Then there's restorative sex, right? So restorative sex, this is using intimacy and life force energy to heal the body, the mind, the heart, the soul. It's empowering. It helps you access energy inside of you. You can channel this energy to heal yourself and others. That's part of sex magic. You can manifest things in your lives, different goals, whether it's money, work, whatever. It can help heal innumerable parts of ourselves. So restorative sex comes down to intent and emotion, right? Then there's transformational sex, probably the most divine form of sex. So this is a divine experience, which is part of changing your life, the way you see the world, the way you connect to yourself and other people. It's almost like a plant medicine journey is what I compared it to. If anybody's, gone on a shroom journey or something, So whether you're self-pleasuring or with a partner and you're doing transformational sex, it does feel like a transcendental event, right? I'm bringing out some Emerson here, or Thoreau. No, Emerson. It's Emerson. So it's transcending individuality. It's sort of feeling that oneness of the universe. We call that cosmic orgasm. Different branches of practitioners give it a different tagline. I call it cosmic. It can almost feel like an astral event, like you've left your body. And it is, usually attached to exploring new things, connecting with more than one person or energy. And I'm not saying you're having, big sex events, but you could have a partner, or maybe you're by yourself, but you're connecting to other energies, maybe your higher self. Maybe there's a lot of different things going on. So we call that sexploration. So that can reveal new and transformative paths to pleasure and presence, shifting the way you perceive yourself and the way you perceive the world. So that's the goal. The goal is to start with restorative sex and move into transformational sex. Those 2 areas is where you're manifesting and doing sex magic for yourself or even for others. So moving on. Next exercise. Okay. I gotta move this out of the way because thank you. It's the pleasure prayer. Okay, so I have a list of supplies. This is all about calling in like a light bulb moment in a heightened state of arousal. So this is kind of the precursor to manifesting an orgasm. That's sex magic is very, very particular in that area. So it's very similar to a sex magic ritual. So you are encouraged to connect to the potential of the universe, which is all the energy that you have around you at any given time. You're going to focus on some place in your life that you need guidance or new perspective. You can do this alone or with a partner. So, say, for example, you have a big decision coming up about buying a house, and you're not sure if you should buy this house or not. You're not sure if you should take on this new mortgage payment or not. You're just not sure, and you're stuck. You're kind of stuck. That would be a great light bulb moment for when you're in that heightened state of arousal to shoot out at the universe to get divine guidance. So you're going to set that intention. Oops, sorry. Um, I would stick to one thing. I mean, I put in here any places you would like some divine wisdom, but when you're first doing these exercises, stick to one thing. And then as you get good at this, then you can ask for, multiple things. So you're going to lean into that, knowing that the universe is supporting you. You can call out on your higher self, your spirit guides, any deity or archetypes you work with, to awaken what we call your eros. That's your eros is your part of your spirit that is sexually oriented, right? So you're going to seduce yourself or each other if you're doing this with a partner. Um, you're not going to rush through things. You're going to let tension mount and build. The more energy that you can build during sex, whether it's with yourself or somebody else, is ideal. They call that edging, because the stronger the arousal, the stronger the life force becomes at release. So you're going to merge that intention with your climax. So when you orgasm or immediately after, because at first you might have a hard time. It was funny because when I first learned how to do this years ago, the guy who was teaching me, who was teaching a group of us, said, he uses an example. He's like, so say you want money. Imagine how much money you need. Imagine it in the form of a check. And at the moment of orgasm, visualize that check with that amount coming to you through the mail or getting deposited in your bank account or whatever. So here's the thing, like you orgasm, it's hard to think of anything, right? Like, how do you think? Nobody thinks an orgasm, right? It takes a lot of practice, but with practice, you will be able to do this. And it might be immediately after, but just bring in that intention, that question, whatever it is. For this specific exercise, it's information. You're not trying to manifest, money, but you're looking to manifest communication or information from your spirit allies or your higher self. So you're going to do that. Afterwards, you're going to relax. You're going to kind of objectively observe again any feelings, visualizations, sensations, thoughts, et cetera, that come through in those following moments. Make sure you're letting go of attachment, hold space for whatever is available. Don't have any expectations and don't expect guidance to come through in an obvious or familiar way, because that could distract you from other ways that they may be communicating with you. So make sure you're staying open to all ways for them to communicate. Because if you're looking at a candle and expecting, okay, this candle is going to blow itself out, if that's my answer, don't do that, because that's shit. Like, you need to give them an opportunity to communicate however they're able to, and it may not be blowing out that candle. And then be mindful over the next week as well. So sometimes there's a delay, especially when we're looking for messaging from spirit. So the universe and spirit's going to deliver clarity through an outside source sometimes, such as another person or a book you find or a challenge you experience or some sort of life circumstance. That could be communication. So in that following week, pay attention to what's going on and what's being put in front of you, because that could be answering your question too. Don't ever estimate outside sourcing. That's where 9/10 of our messages come from. So the next exercise is the highest love journal exercise. This is just about kind of exploration. Consider 3 desires, lifestyle choices, or topics that you fear addressing, maybe with your partner or maybe with others. I want you to consider how you would communicate this to them compassionately. This is about kind of embracing things that maybe embarrass us or that we're afraid to, kind of approach with people. I want you to zoom out, consider how sharing this information will set you free and that other person free. Consider asking yourself hard questions, like how sharing your truth and could bring more vulnerability or connection to that relationship. How could it give them permission to find their truth? I put an example on here of a wife who wanted to start a business, and she was afraid to tell her husband because, he's going to be upset about money. He's going to be stressed out about money. But by sharing that truth, They were able to problem solve it, and he's seen the greater potential for joy, and maybe even made him think about how happy he was in his job. So it's just an example, but that's how sometimes we let fear hold us back, especially in sex work. If we're doing sex magic with somebody else, we have a partner. Um, we can't let fears hold us back, because if we can get over that fear of what the other person's going to say or do and just own our truth and verbalize our truth, 9 times out of 10, we're probably going to help that person too, because we are being vulnerable. We're allowing them to be vulnerable. It's going to strengthen our connection, and it's going to give them food for thought. How happy are they? Maybe they want to do what you're doing. So list 2 things you're afraid to express. How could expressing this truth set yourself free and maybe your partner free, or whoever, else is involved in this sex work thing that you're going to be doing? The next exercise, safety is sexy. Sorry, there's so many exercises, but I put them in order because this is kind of how you want to work to get to a point where you're really good at sex magic. So safety is sexy. So this is more for coupled intimacy. Safety is a form of self-care. Everybody should have non-negotiables that are agreed upon and verbalized. These are your absolute must. They're hard boundaries. So a non-sexual example could be dietary restrictions or not drinking and driving. So sexual examples could be, obviously not being intimate with a new partner until you've been to each other's homes at least once and seen what your houses look like, or not having sex under the influence of alcohol. So have your non-negotiables. They don't need to be justified. They're tailored to you, not to anybody else. What's accessible and empowering for you. Make sure you have that list before you start practicing sex magic with a partner. Um, whether you are single or playing the field, or if you're in a committed monogamous relationship or anywhere in between, always consider non-negotiables that you want to implement before partnered intimacy. Make this decision in a regulated and unaroused state and commit to it. Actually follow through on this commitment to yourself, because isn't that 9/10 of the problem too, is follow through, right? Like we tell ourselves these things and then we start bending for other people. Don't bend. Honor these commitments to yourself. Have these hard conversations with your partner or potential partners. This is a big one with empowerment and boundaries. How many of us don't have good boundaries, or we bend? That's a problem when you're doing sex magic. You need to have boundaries that you reinforce and that you respect and that you honor. So this is an exercise to help you do that. All right. Relating styles, probably my favorite chart. So I put the 11 most common ones on here, like to each their own. But the chart, you have these high and low sexual exclusivity styles, and then you have these high and low emotional exclusivity styles. So what does that mean? um if you're going to do sex magic with a partner, it is a bit, I mean, it's very powerful solo, but with a partner obviously it's doubly so. These are the types of partnerships you could enter while doing sex magic. Obviously everybody knows what monogamy is. That's one person. Monogamish. That's a long-term committed partnership, and occasionally maybe you guys go out, have a little fun, like on somebody's birthday or something. Then there's there's polyfidelity. So all partners in the group agree to not have romantic and sexual relationships outside the group. So that could be 3, 4, 5, 6 plus people that are involved with one another and only with one another and don't go outside the group. So open marriages and relationships, this is, sexual relationships with multiple people in and outside of that partnership. Swinging, this is where couples swap sexual partners. Asexual, I some of these, I'm sorry, you guys, I giggle, and I don't care what you do. I have a couple of relatives that keep popping into my head as I'm reading this. So this usually involves an asexual who has a single partner in which one or both of them have outside partnerships that are usually more sexually exclusive. So kind of a weird combo there. Polyintimates, that's sexual exclusivity with one person, but they are actually emotionally involved with another person that has elevated importance, or they have a shared resource. and I'm not going to go through all these. You can read through them. I mean, you got all these different types of commitment styles. The last one on the list here is relationship anarchy. I never heard of that before until I started studying this. Um, and there's no definable structure, fluid with no solid differentiation between romantic or platonic relationships. It's very weird. To me, I guess I would have just put horror. but, but we don't judge. But that's relationship anarchy, aka whoring, I guess. But whatever, to each their own. I don't care. Just be safe, right? So those are all the different relating styles. And you want to find a relating style if you're going to partner with somebody that really truly does work for you. Um, like there's a lot of options out there nowadays, but it has to be true to you. So the next exercise I recommend is a cord cutting ritual. So relationships should never hold you back. They should set you free. They should help you to bring out your greatest potential, your highest self. They should support and be almost like a celebration of energy with when you're with a compatible partner, it should lift you up. A lot of times though, again, societal conditioning, these unhealthy attachments, these codependencies, these past traumas, all these things that have created fear, they take the shape of these heavy cords in our lives, especially energetically. So when we perform a cord cutting ritual or a cord cutting meditation, it does support you in letting go of those cords, these connections that no longer have any purpose. They serve no purpose for you, and they affect the way you are able to relate to others. So by doing this, you're kind of unlocking the potential to grow with a new partner in a more expansive way, or with yourself. It's a great practice to do if you are in a current partnership with your partner. I think that doing cord cutting rituals as together in partnership is a wonderful way to really empower a relationship. But either way, it doesn't matter, solo or with somebody. So put on some, gentle music, go outside, whatever. You can use a guided meditation. There's plenty of those on YouTube. So after relaxing your body, call forth again that energy of your higher self, which was written in the earlier exercise. You're going to kind of imagine it is a very visual process, imagining maybe that other person standing in front of you that you have a heavy cord with that really maybe affected the way that you are able to be in relationships. Visualize where those cords and chains are at between the two of you. There's going to be dark cords, light cords. These cords may be connected to the 7 chakra points. Maybe they're connected between the hearts, or maybe even the sex organs of both of you. Really look in that meditation and find where those cords are. And think about the meaning of those cords. Why are they connected the way they are? Why are they so heavy in certain areas? That's going to come to you in meditation. Um, and a lot of times you're going to think about that relationship, and whatever you experience in that relationship is going to explain what you're seeing, right? So now just imagine yourself having a large sword and slicing through those weighty cords one at a time. You can even say out loud, a way to really kind of, amplify the intent, I am free, you are free. Because you're not just freeing yourself, maybe you're freeing that other person too. And so just, cut those cords one at a time, until you're fully liberated. And then afterwards, consider what, if any, integration steps need to be taken. This could be you setting new boundaries in a new partnership, or maybe having a conversation or setting intentions that maybe you didn't have before. It should be an empowering experience. It should make you feel lighter and more open. So then we go into golden shadow. So we talked about shadow work. The golden shadow is part of our shadow energy, but it's definitely more sexual oriented. It's where our eros is. It's where we tap into our sexually divine energy. So, a lot of times people refer to this as darkness. Oh, sorry. Um, and it's not easily understood. So we'll call it a metaphorical darkness. Darkness is primal, it's magical, it's transformative. It's in the darkness of a womb that a baby is, grown. It's in the darkness of a chrysalis that a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. And it's in the darkness of soil that a seed is able to sprout. Same thing with the golden shadow. It may be a dark place, but that's where things grow and are born. So it is a gift that we are given. We have it unconsciously hidden in all of us. Sometimes we keep it kind of repressed. It's a way to maybe protect ourselves from something we deem unwanted, maybe unwanted attention, or maybe we perceive some sort of negative consequence. So it is our untapped potential. It's where all of our unexplored possibilities for pleasure live, right? So loving yourself, the world's going to love you too. This is where you do this, is with that golden shadow. Um, and I put in here, this is about finding God, and I'm using this term subjectively, right? This is about finding God in the dark, and God is different to all of us. God, the goddess, the deities, they're all really I'm an omnist, so I think they're all interconnected. It's one divine source, and every face and name you want to put to it's all the same thing. Um, but it is how we go about finding that divine source in the dark. So getting in touch with your golden shadows, obviously very powerful. And that's what you're going to use in sex magic. So the next exercise is recovering your golden shadow, because most people, when they go into this journey, they've lost touch with it, if they ever even were in touch with it. So this is about, you're going to find a quiet space to be introspective. You're going to bring forth some very specific energies, and those energies are envy and jealousy, right? Because those are the two things that keep our golden shadow suppressed most of the time. So, what experiences, what people or concepts bring forth these feelings in you? What does that say about your own desires, right? Who do you idolize or put on a pedestal? And what might that reveal about who you desire to be in this world, right? This is how we get in touch with our golden shadow. Call forth your own inner critic. Um, that part of ourself that feels like an imposter. So this is your basic shadow energy work again. We all have a masking energy inside of us that doesn't feel like it's really us. It's somebody else. We have to pull on it when we're maybe at a work dinner, or we're giving a presentation, and we have almost like this imposter syndrome. We don't feel like it's really us. We're kind of presenting a facade because we want to be accepted. Pull that part of yourself out. How could the fears that feed that be keeping you from your magic, from being able to be a powerful witch or a powerful practitioner in your own right? Manifesting the things you want. What is it that they're trying to protect? What do they want you to hear? I want you to consider all your faults, your imperfections. How could these be perceived outside of yourself? And how can you channel or alchemize these faults into your own superpower? Because really, our faults usually end up being our most powerful tools, right? Take a moment to be with these answers and really observe any synchronicities that could be present. So this is a very important exercise. You're probably going to want to do it a few times. Doing it once probably isn't going to be quite enough. 7 steps of magic. Now, definitely we're talking about sex magic tonight, but really in any magic, it's going to be somewhat similar. So number 1, setting an intention. Number 2, in this form of magic, awakening your eros, your golden shadow. 3, merging with life force at climax. So in sex magic, your life force is peaked at orgasm, and that is where you're merging your intention to manifest. Integrating and making space is number 4. So all these things that we've been talking about, integrating all this stuff to make space for the magic. You have to integrate to make space. Be grateful for all that you already have. We usually forget this step, right? We're so busy wanting something, desiring something, trying to make something happen, that we forget to be grateful for what we already have. And so gratitude is humbling, and it keeps us humble. And that's good, because that's where you're going to manifest. If you become prideful and, that's going to be a problem. Take action. Okay, you don't need permission to want what you want. Allow yourself to want what you want, and make your ego an employee for your purpose. You control your ego and drive it. Do not let it in the driver's seat. Do not let it behind the wheel. And you don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to rationalize things. If you want something, you want it, and that's good enough. Okay. Um, Sorry, let me close that out. And then celebrate your sex magic successes. So as you're doing sex magic, and I'm going to give you that ritual in a moment. Sorry, I had to walk you through the prep work, right? Celebrate your successes. For me, when I have a successful manifestation, I have a blessing bowl, and I actually buy precious, semi-precious gems, between 200 and 500 carats at a time. And every time I successfully manifest something, I put a gemstone offering in that bowl, a thank you to the universe, a thank you to myself, my higher self. So find a way for you, whatever that is, celebrate your success. Maybe it's writing down on a piece of paper, thank you, and putting it in a petition bowl, whatever it is, make a ritual for that. So the next exercise is your basic sex magic rituals. So this is very basic, but this gives you a platform to start. So number one, allow yourself to want what you want. You'll be harnessing very powerful life force energy in this ritual. And where would you like to direct it? This is where intent comes in. Do you need money? How much? What for? Are you trying to make a decision? What is the decision? What are your options? So you want to also be very specific. And that's in number two, set your intention, right? What is it that you want to manifest during this orgasm, right? What do you need to happen? What information are you looking to download? Maybe you're looking for a spirit ally to communicate with you. Whatever that is, set that intention. And then you're going to seduce yourself or each other if you're working with a partner. You're going to be fully present, full presence and pleasure. Really set the mood for this practice. Take your time to awaken your eros, your golden shadow. Don't rush. Sometimes in the beginning, it's really easy to get excited that you're going to manifest some money or something and you rush. Take your time. You don't want to rush because again, remember building that energy builds that life force. It makes it more powerful at the time of orgasm, which is release when you release it. So three, visualize with gratitude, receiving what you desire, and even declare it out loud. At first, that might be a good, screaming it out loud at orgasm or right after. So you're going to merge that with your life force at climax. You're going to let go of anything else that isn't, part of this intention. Don't be thinking about, you got to call, grandma and, in an hour or some shit. Make sure you're not thinking about other things. Um, Make sure that you've done the prep work. So if you haven't let go of limiting patterns and beliefs, you're going to be sending mixed signals to the universe. And if you send mixed signals, you're going to receive mixed results. Okay. So I can't stress that enough with people that come to me and they're like, well, I did everything you said and it didn't happen. Like it didn't manifest. Well, did you let go of what was limiting you? Like if you didn't, you're sending a mixed signal and guess what? The universe is going to send mixed shit right back to you. So make sure you've done the legwork on this. Maybe consider journaling at this stage. I think a sex magic journal is a good idea just to track progress. Next, take a moment to consider what the universe has already so generously provided. All of your basic needs are probably met, and sometimes most of us, many of our desires are met too. Again, that gratitude. Take a moment for gratitude. Next, consider who you need to become to embody the manifestation of desire. So, say your manifestation intent that evening was money, which a lot of times it is. So, and it was money, and you needed X amount of dollars to pay some bill or something. What other things do you need to embody energetically to manifest, somebody with abundance and prosperity that's not worrying about money? Okay, so this is kind of like a self-exploration exercise too, because the universe will bless you to a point. It will get tired eventually if you're not doing the things you're supposed to do. So, and then you'll be like, well, why isn't anything working? Everything was working for months or for years, and now nothing's working. Well, maybe the universe is saying, you're not embodying all the things that you need to live this life. So consider it. And then decide on 3 action items that get the ball rolling. So like if you're needing to make certain changes, maybe in your spending, write down those action items to get the ball rolling, take that action. The universe will bless you for it. And then again, choose that method of celebration for your successful manifestation. So when you get that money, celebrate it. Yeah, it's another good way to just thank the universe and your higher self. So next, this is called exploring the edge. So 3 steps here, it's journaling. So after you've done your first sex magic ritual, you've tapped into your golden shadow, journal 3 things that used to intimidate you, but you now enjoy or feel neutral towards. Journal 3 things that are outside of your comfort zone that you'd like to know more about. And then journal 3 things that you've tried that you simply aren't for you or you don't want to do again. Again, this is exploration that always needs to be a fundamental part of your practice, exploring these things. So the last 2 exercises are kind of, this is called The God is My Dom. This is actually an exercise written by a glamour witch in Chicago who I used to work with. So, I mean, I can see where he's coming with this. I wanted to include it because it is pretty popular. I know a lot of people that use it. So a lot of people do feel closest to God or divine source at orgasm. So a lot of times, certain practitioners will converse with divine during a masturbation session, whether that's divine source or a deity or a spiritual ally. It is considered a pleasure practice that's similar to a sex magic ritual. It is help to connect you to infinite potential of the universe. So this intention for this exercise is inviting divine source, or I'd like to add your higher self to work through you. So this is about leaning into the energy of the universe to support you, asking for clarity, very similar to the earlier exercise. It is, seducing yourself, getting in touch with that golden shadow, building energy with edging because you want to really strengthen that life force. And then, claiming it, especially at orgasm and immediately after, asking the universe or God or divine source or your higher self what matters most, rather focusing on an outcome that you desire, like you would in sex magic. You are just going to allow yourself to become a receptive vessel and to surrender to something higher than you, to let them tell you what it is that you need. So it's a good kind of open door, tell me what I'm not doing type exercise. Um, and then objectively, of course, observe everything that comes in the moments that follow. And even for the, again, the next week, you kind of want to pay attention to signs and synchronicities, and just be open to that guidance and signs from spirit. Um, so it is kind of a tweak on the earlier exercise, to allow the universe just to speak to you, something maybe you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. And then lastly, this is called shame to shadow work. This is about it's funny, but it's necessary. Journaling about your dirtiest fantasies, the one that you feel guilty and ashamed about, right? The one that you clear your search history after, or the one that gives you a pit in your stomach, or it makes your heart jump, or gets you really worked up, right? Because this is usually where our shame lies, right? And part of shadow work and sex magic is shame clearage, which is probably one of the hardest shadow energies to really come to terms with. So you're going to meditate on that imagery as an objective observer. You're not going to judge it. And it's going to be really hard to do that at first. Then you're going to do kind of a body scan, see where the judgment is living in your body. Really breathe into that judgment and let it go. Give yourself permission to fully enjoy whatever this kink is, acknowledging that you're in a safe container to do so in your own body. Ask yourself where this desire or this kink might have come from. Is it an adrenaline rush? Is it, the excitement of being out of control, or a sense of danger? Really think about what it is that is connecting you to that particular fantasy that's creating shame. Maybe there's something on your sexual timeline that needs to be addressed, right? And then lastly, if you're still being pulled by this kink after this, meditation here, maybe consider something you can do to bring it into reality. Sometimes we need to experience things to maybe get over them. Maybe you need to go a little bit deeper into that. Maybe go to the sex shop, or go to a nudist colony, or maybe go to a retreat. Maybe you need to sit down and share this desire with your partner. That could be embarrassing. Or maybe you need to go see a sex therapist and get therapy and talk about it with a professional. Whatever it is, how can you give yourself permission to access um, what your golden shadow is holding? And so this is usually a shame point exercise. And this will come up throughout sex magic workings. Shame is something that, it's a shadow energy in sex work that seems to be just really hard to shake. And usually it is some sort of trauma. There's usually some sort of trauma that needs resolution there. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But definitely deep dive into that. For example, with me, I actually did go to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico. It was like clothing. They said clothing optional, but not really. Everybody was naked. And it was definitely a sex resort. Like, I didn't realize how much of a sex resort it was. I knew that there was going to be like these areas, like these cabanas poolside, and these special like jacuzzi and pool areas where people could have open sex. But if you didn't want to be in that area, you just avoided it. But I mean, it was kind of a rush. I mean, it was something neat to experience and something neat to see and have that experience. Is it something? Definitely it was a shameful thing. I think there was a lot of shame in being there and watching and seeing and kind of like just being there. And so I was able to release that shame and embrace, just the acceptance of, different people like different things. And just because maybe it's not my thing doesn't make it wrong. So, I mean, sometimes we just need to do these weird things, like that definitely was a weird thing for me, but I don't regret doing it. And that's that. That was a lot. I'm so sorry, you guys. All right. Questions. Does anybody have any questions? I definitely can email this to whoever wants it. Just shoot me an email or a
Well,
text.
I don't have any questions. I mean, because that was a lot.
I know. I know it was,
But I
right?
was just like thinking about like shame. Like, I think every woman in some kind of way has shame, whether it's because of things that have happened in their lives, whether it's religion, whether it's all of the things. I mean, I think that every woman experiences that. And maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but every woman I know somehow, in some way, feels some kind of shame when it comes to sex. And, with us, Mish, it starts with grandma who only had sex to get pregnant, and then she got
Right.
pregnant 6 times, and then she basically didn't want to ever have sex again.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
at one point, Grandpa said to her, and I don't know if you know this or not, but when I was a kid, my mom told me, and I don't know why she ever told me this. I think I was like 10 years old or something. Maybe she was talking to somebody else and I overheard, and I can't remember. But she said that Grandpa said, "Okay, Donna, I'm sleeping now. You can come to bed," because she was so afraid to
Right.
like go to bed if he was expecting sex. And that was kind of like how we grew up. And then when I was a kid, I grew up, with my one friend who took me to church all the time. And you can't have sex till you're married, and you can't touch yourself. And there's,
Right.
masturbation is a sin, and all these
Right.
other things. And, of course, I mean, things are different now. I'm old enough. I was going to say my age, but I'm not going to. But anyways, like, I mean, obviously, I think of it in a different way now, but for so long,